Hey yo, this is Talib Kweli, the BKMC, Ebony Man MCEO. You are checking out Montreality. In the classroom, I was a A student. Like, I was like a nerd in school, straight up, until about junior high school, and I got kind of I fell out of that, and I fell into hanging out with kids who were cutting school. So even when I was cutting school, I was still like doing cultural things, but I was definitely like straight A student, you know what I'm saying, all the way through. Up until then I was just getting F's. My first job was I worked at the cafeteria of the high school that I went to. I worked as a camp counselor. I sold crack. No, I'm just playing, I ain't sell crack. I did try selling weed, but I was a horrible drug dealer. I lost all the money and I was no good at it. Then I ended up working at bookstores. I worked at Shakespeare and Company bookstore, and then I worked at Akiru Books, which I ended up purchasing with Mos Def. Well, my first big paycheck that I got, I think I bought some Wallabies. I was in London, and I was with Mos Def. We was on our Wallaby kick, and I bought like some nice sweaters, a watch, frivolous stuff, nothing important. Yeah, I was MC Pure Skills for a little bit, and I was MC Genesis after that, and then I was Talib Kweli. Well, first of all, there's no one who doesn't like reading books. There's no people who tell you, I don't like to read. That's nonsense. Everybody likes to read. If you're literate, you like to read. It's just you don't always find stuff that's interesting to you or stuff that you relate to. For me, growing up, the books that I like to read biographies a lot. So Miles Davis, Malcolm X, those are my favorite autobiographies. The Paulo Coelho, spiritual fiction, spiritual writing, even if it's a fiction thing like Paulo Coelho, The Alchemist, Zaire, some of his books have been some of my favorites. Octavia Butler's like science fiction, but also I'm a student in history. You got John Henry Clark, Dr. Ben, you got Hakeem Madhubuti, who's a poet. I read poetry, the list goes on. I'm working on a book now. I have different titles for it. Right now it's called Vibrate Higher. But that might change by the time the book come out. Yeah, my book is like memoir, music, race, history, and memoir all together. I'm trying to make it an interesting read. In a previous lifetime, I feel like I was a jazz musician, like Thelonious Monk or something. Cause I live like a jazz musician, and I feel like the jazz musicians are the early version of the hip-hop musician, like a music that started in the black community and that was embraced by mainstream America and became to define America, and that's what hip-hop has become for this generation. Favorite cartoon character of all time? I'm gonna have to say Calvin and Hobbes. No, I'll switch that. The Boondocks. Huey Freeman is my favorite. It used to be Calvin and Hobbes before the Boondocks existed. Now it's Huey and Riley. I wasn't really too into video games, but I did have a Sega back in the day. Now you're trying to date me. You know what I'm saying? Like, I used to play the early Sega games like Phantasy Star and Outrun. But that's when I was a real little kid. I didn't play video games until since I was really little. I say on Gravitas, my new album, the first lyric on it is it's about to be the realest shit you ever heard. A lynch rapper's got him hanging on my every word. That's so, the Gravitas is how I feel right now. But Get By is pretty personal. Joy is pretty personal. Soon a New Day, Lonely People. These are records that are based on Black Girl Pain. These are records that are based on personal experiences. We got some Black Star shows coming up, 2 in London, 1 in Munich, Germany, in the next month or so, and that should be fun. Black Star is like a live experience thing at this point. Working on that too, trying to work through the kinks and the paperwork, trying to get Liberation 2 off the ground. God willing, it happens. Well, spirituality exists in our communities and is represented in the art, but it has been underrepresented in the mainstream. But just because it's been underrepresented in the mainstream doesn't mean it's still not an undercurrent running under it. The most popular artists in hip-hop, from Kendrick to Kanye to J. Cole, the Kanye and J. Cole in particular have, Kendrick comes from a crew of dudes who